Hello, everybody.
Hello.
So our first reader is, can you hear me? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Cool. So our first reader is Anders Carlson Wee, and he is the author of The Low Passions. He has received fellowships from the National Endowment of the Arts, the McKnight Foundation, Red Loaf, the Sewanee Writers Conference, the Napa Valley Writers Conference. His work has appeared in The Nation, The Kenyon Review, BuzzFeed, Plowshares, New England Review, Poetry Daily, and the best American non-required reading. His debut chapbook, Dynamite, won the 2015 Frost Place Chapbook Prize. With his brother, Kai Carlson Wee, he co-directed the award-winning poetry film, Riding the High Line. Anders is the winner of the 9th Letters Poetry Award, Blue Mesa Reviews Poetry Prize, the New Delta Reviews Editor's Choice Prize, and the 2017 Poetry International Prize. He holds an MFA from Vanderbilt University and lives in Minneapolis. Please help me welcome Anders.
Thank you, Amira, for that lovely introduction. Thanks everybody for coming out. I'm excited to be here. Northfield is actually my hometown. I lived here when I was little. So this is what Northfield could produce. Now with Rob at the helm, there's going to be even better things coming. But yeah, thanks everybody for coming out to hear poetry late at night on a cold night. I want to thank all the other readers for being here and Carleton College for having us. This is an exciting chance to read all together too. I think it's especially fun for poets to be able to read together. And the event is sort of focused on poetics, civic poetics, the idea of community and how poetry plays a role in community. So I think you'll probably hear some of those themes coming up tonight. I think when we're thinking about community and our role in it, often our friends and family are sort of our first main piece of that. And so I'm going to start with a family poem. How many of y'all have siblings in here tonight? Okay, if I could have all of you who just raise your hand quickly leave the room. No. But yeah, this first poem is for all of you who have siblings. It's about a game my brother and I used to play when we were little kids. It's called Dynamite. My brother hits me hard with a stick, so I whip a choke chain across his face. We're playing a game called Dynamite, where everything you throw is a stick of dynamite, unless it's pine. Pine sticks are rifles, and pine cones are grenades. But everything else is dynamite. I run down the driveway and back behind the garage, where we keep the leopard frogs in buckets of water with logs and rock islands. When he comes around the corner, the blood is pouring out of his nose and down his neck, and he has a hammer in his hand. I pick up his favorite frog and say, "If you come any closer, I'll squeeze." He tells me I won't. He starts coming closer. I say a hammer isn't dynamite. He reminds me that everything is dynamite. So my brother and I have actually stayed close over the years. And have done a lot of traveling together. We both got interested in hopping freight trains and hitchhiking, and did a lot of that together in our 20s. And some of my poems grow out of those times traveling. This next one is sort of a portrait poem of someone I met while I was traveling, and it's also sort of about how public space it can be sort of transformed or interpreted differently depending on who you are as an individual within that public space. And this one is called McDonald's. You walk all night and into the next day to survive the sudden October snow. You have no money or hope of money. Your backpack is a cloth sack with duct tape straps and safety pins in place of zippers. Your gloves have no thumbs, just holes, just unraveling half fingers. You've come inside for the heat, for plastic spoons, mayo, salt and sugar packets, hand napkins you'll ball later for insulation beneath your clothes. You've come for the bathroom, soap to scrub your face, your neck, your pits, toilet rolls for kindling flames as you camp alone tonight in the woods or in a silo, mirror for popping your zits, hand dryer for drying your hair, your musty coat. You've come to run warm water over hands you can no longer feel, come to sit and rest and do nothing and think nothing and be no one. You ask the boy at the counter if you can have some water. He nods, tapping his foot to a bluegrass tune, slides a paper cup toward you with a smooth, memorized hand, asks out of habit if that will be everything. Let's see here. So this next one is a poem called Volunteer, and it's sort of secretly about the future of humanity. So you can just take that as you will. This one's called Volunteer. For a couple years, I volunteered at the Prosthetics Center in the south wing of St. Mary's Memorial. Every Thursday, I pushed the lab equipment up against the walls, mopped the floor, moved it back. I was basically a janitor, but they called me a lab assistant, trying to make it sound important. All the patients who came in were missing something, usually an arm or a leg, a clean loss, a stub that still moved, the kind of thing you would think of. But other times it wasn't. This one guy had skin where his nostrils should be, a fire maybe. This girl was missing 3 fingers and part of her palm, probably an accident with a handgun, but she was so young. I would mop the floor and try to guess what had happened to everyone. Watch as they practiced walking across the room with silicone toes. Listen carefully as they dropped spoons on the clean floor from experimental hands. So I've got to do a little shout out to my dad and my uncle who are both here in the audience. Thank you all for coming out. I come from a family of many pastors and Lutherans, and this next one has a lot of sort of Lutheran and religious Christian language that comes into it, but it's also sort of another portrait poem from times traveling on the road. This one's called The Low Passions. The Lord came down because God wasn't enough. He lies on sodden cardboard behind bushes in the churchyard, wrapped in faded red, a sleeping bag he found or traded for, dark stains like clouds before a downpour, the stone wall beside him rising, always rising, the edges of stone going blunt where the choir boy climbs. He opens his mouth, but nothing goes in and nothing comes out. Like the sideshow man who long ago lost his right testicle to the crossbar of a huffy, he peddles the leftover pain, the stitches clipped by his father, the fiberglass bathtub running with color, the puffy new scar, the crooked look of the pitted half-sack. He tells me you only need one nut, and I want to believe him. I want to believe he has daughters, sons, a grandchild on the way, a wife at home in a blue apron baking. But why this day-old bread from the dumpster, this stash of hollow bottles in the buckthorn, this wrinkled can of Pabst? The Lord came down because God wasn't enough, because the childless man draws the bathwater and cries, because the choir boy never sings as he climbs, because the bread has all molded and the mouths are all open, open to the clotting air. Homeless, anything helps, anything you can spare. God bless you, God bless you, God bless, God, Lord God, 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 good Lord, very good God. So I'm gonna read one more for you all. This next one comes out of some of the experiences I had hopping freight trains. And this next one is about a trip I took in Canada. And in Canada, they have a special type of train car called a Canadian grainer. And it's a good place to ride if you're a freight hopper because it keeps you out of the weather, it protects you from the rain and the wind, but it also keeps you hidden from the railroad police that are looking for you. And it's on the back of the Canadian grainer. It's a big round hole that you can climb inside, and that hole is called the Owl's Eye. And so this next poem, you can kind of imagine being on a freight train, riding in this hole, this big Owl's Eye hole, and you're looking backwards at the train as the train is going forwards. This one's called Riding the Owl's Eye. Out of all the dumpsters that could have been empty, all the weather that could have bloomed over the prairie and ruined me, all the cars that could have sped by without hesitating and left me on the fog line, nameless forever, the trains that could have taken my legs, the hobos that could have pulled a switchblade and opened me like a flood enfolding the red North Dakota clay. Out of all the hazards we pass through in amazement, all the stories we tell of luck and good fortune and prayer and survival, it is always our own lungs that dry up and darken, our own miles that straighten, our own hunger that wanes. The Lord gives us mountains, and we fail to mine out that grandness. The Lord gives us trains, and we waste those distances transporting coal. Some say the world is broken. Some say the good Lord has forsaken our dreams. But I say it is our own throat that grows the cancer, our own asthma that blackens our breath to a wheeze. And the truth is, the mile-long train will always crawl past. The socket-fixed gaze of the owl's skull will always turn perfectly backwards. We will always be bodies among ghosts. And what is important to them is not how we ride on the westbound freighter, not how we shiver, not how we crawl crooked and thin and climb yet again into the trembling eye hole. It is not about suffering. It is not about fear. We must peer out from inside the owl's eye. Watch the coal dust cook in the wind eddies. Watch it linger. Watch it spiral thinly as it bruises the blue-faded mind of the buffalo sky. We must be the pupil that swells in the coming darkness, the cargo worth carrying across the distances. Thank you.
Hi again. Our next reader is Gretchen Marquette. She is the author of Mayday, and her poetry has appeared in Poetry, Harper's, and the Paris Review, and the Tin House, PBS NewsHour, and elsewhere. She lives in Minneapolis. Please help me welcome Gretchen.
Thank you all for coming out tonight. Can you hear me okay?
No.
A little more.
No. I'll work on it.
Yeah, you gotta get kind of close.
Okay, how's that? Okay. Thank you to Emily and everybody who put this reading together. It's really special. I love having a chance to be out in the world on a weeknight in February, so thank you for coming. I too am going to start with somewhat of a family poem. This poem is called Hunter, and it has an epigraph from Heraclitus which says that nature loves to hide. I stay up late to see the thing that leaves strange tracks in the gravel up the driveway. 2 lines like something being dragged. Fresh lines each night. Discussion extends over Father's Day dinner of fish we caught, cold lake still melting from its flesh. Whose tracks? I stay up late. At 2 the cat comes, tame stray. At 3 the gray fox, young and lithe, squatting to piss outside the bowl of the yard light. A dozen autumn's worth of antlers nailed to the post, dark making everything, even knowledge. The Cooper's hawk's breastbone broken always by its strategy to be fed, crashing into undergrowth to scare up smaller birds. Poison parsnips in ditches, their juices blister skin, not the night you wield the scythe, but later when the sun touches you. I spent so long trying to be inside the quiet, I didn't notice until too late that it was all around. Fell asleep and missed it when she dragged herself through grass and gravel. But my dad saw the raccoon 2 nights later, back legs crushed and useless. He considered his gun leaning against the closet wall and the phone in its cradle. Over breakfast he said, "I'm glad you weren't out there alone." So my book has a couple different sort of arcs to it, but one of the arcs that sort of surprised me and that just sort of arose naturally as I was writing is it sort of became like a love letter to my neighborhood. Sort of evidence of that is that my cover is actually the street that I currently live on in Powderhorn Park. An artist did a different painting for every street that faced the park, and so a few of the poems I'm going to read tonight from my book, my neighborhood features in that poem. Have any of you been to the May Day Festival in South Minneapolis? Yeah? Okay. So this is a poem I wrote called Song for the Festival. At the May Day parade, my mask made of moss and bark, my hair full of flowers, my friend beside me, her pretty red mouth under the hawk's beak of her mask of green sage. At the children's pageant, music died in the speakers. The shadow of a crow passed over. My hair a crown of flowers, yellow and red roses large as fists, flowers on which I'd spent my last $20 at the Mercado. But beauty wasn't enough. Being admired by strangers was not enough. I saw a girl wandering looking for her mother. I knelt down, lowered my mask, showed her my face. She's looking for you too, I say. She tries to spot her mother's yellow dress. A gold dog passes, happy and white-faced, wearing pink nylon fairy wings. The girl points and laughs. The hard part of her day is over. The people I'm looking for, I don't know where they are. I don't know the color of their clothing. From across the park, I see the dark windows of my apartment. Spring has arrived. Let me not despair. This next poem I tried to write for most of my life. My mom grew up in Madison, Wisconsin, and she always told us a story when we were little about this deer that wandered onto State Street and jumped through a plate glass window, and the police had to come and shoot the deer. I don't know why I was told this story, but it was very disturbing to me. I thought about this deer all the time when I was little, and I wanted to write this poem about her. And then I found sort of a way to do that when my brother was deployed for the second time to Afghanistan, just starting to think about the many ways in which life can be unfair and unjust. So this is Deer Through a Boutique Window. Some things can't be mended. Some of us are broken and some remain whole. Something has died in every place on earth. But I can't stop thinking about hooves on waxed black diamonds of linoleum. Also thousands of deer unharmed in the woods bedding down. And fawns unborn to this doe, wrecked among silk stockings, satin slips, pearl earrings. How do we get lost in such a small world? Why are some of us lucky and some of us not? There she lies, scent of her own blood in her nose, the elegant pheromones in their frosted glass bottles, oblivious, unbroken on the shelf. have 2 more poems that I'll read for you tonight. This poem is called Figure Drawing, and I wrote it for a good friend of mine. She happened to be, she was an undergrad art student studying figure drawing, and I was teaching as an adjunct, and my schedule was pretty flexible, and so she needed someone to sit for her, and I sat for her all semester, and so all of her drawings and paintings featured me. It got so that she could sort of draw my face really quickly because she'd drawn it so often. And so this poem is called Figure Drawing. Also important to know and not completely sort of divulge within the poem is that I was going through like the most difficult period of my entire life, and I was really struggling with concepts of like, you know, how can life be so beautiful, and I still don't necessarily always want to be here to see it through. And my friend had lost her mother to suicide when she was 10 years old. And so both of those things kind of were hanging heavily over me at the time in my life. And this poem is called Figure Drawing. On the way to your studio, a Cooper's hawk dove in front of me. It left clutching yellow leaves and not a single sparrow. I knew then, somehow, that I would never take my own life. And I knew it when I sat still before your easel and watched you, holding your sliding stick to measure my trunk. Occasionally you pressed fingers against my lips and hips, legs and hips, bluntly but with care. You are learning about the body and its trappings. You have referred to my clavicle as a bony landmark. There are so many ways to speak about the body. There is a mundane history of people telling their God, if you'd asked me if I wanted to come here, I would have said no. When I was your age, I entered the woods with my hurt and sat against a tree and was surrounded by deer that paid me no mind. Their feet made no noise, they had no scent, no color. You have painted my hair across my back as fire. You've painted my face in mourning and didn't know. Sometimes I'm filled with fear at the thought of seeing this through, like I was that day in the woods, when all I wanted was to lie like a dropped antler on the forest floor. Still today, I am thrilled to be shown the muscles of my own back drawn in charcoal. The bones of my pelvis seem larger than my hips, warmed over with skin. We have a history of telling our gods, if you asked me if I wanted to leave here, I would say no. Done with your work, we walk to the diner for pancakes. You have a smudge of yolk-colored pigment under your nose, another ashy smudge near your right ear. I know how easily I could have missed it. Whatever else happens, I don't want to miss it. The machine of my body is humming. There is a record of my body resting on your easel. It is static, almost. I saw the Cooper's hawk leave the ground with nothing and carry it into the air. The nothing he carried was yellow. It was the most beautiful thing. I meant to warn you there was a second Cooper's hawk. I only have 2 poems with Cooper's hawks. I read them both. This is my last poem. So I live in the Powderhorn neighborhood, as I said, and we had a terrible, destructive storm happen on the solstice a few years back. And so I wrote this poem called Powderhorn after the storm. It's vertigo, walking among downed trees, belled skirts of dirt and tender clover. Birds sit on branches laid prone over fragrant hearts of trunks, hearts slick and white. So many trees uprooted, yet some bushes kept pink blossoms, which today are open, tender throats. My dogs and I traverse the wounds, full of heady bliss, as when a fever breaks or morphine is administered. There's a suppleness to everything, a dampness. One of the dogs bounds through debris, the other picks her way. Both are old. Neither seems to realize it, though one is suddenly afraid of thunder, has spent the last 2 nights whining at my bedside and pissing on the floor. I lost my temper when I took her out at 3 a.m., fingers of siren reaching from all directions, hazard lights of crushed cars blinking in anxious orange in the dark. I jerked her leash, nudged her through the door with my knee. These cruelties aren't held against me. I regret them deeply. Now there's light from another, better world. The sun is out. We stop at the water fountain and I cup my hands to give them a drink. The tentative dog, the one who was afraid and who I betrayed, drinks from my hands, her gentle mouth and soft tongue. I feel my hands for her again and again. Thank you.
The next reader is Michael Torres. Michael Torres was born and brought up in Pomona, California, where he spent his adolescence as a graffiti artist. His work has appeared or is forthcoming in The Sun, Copper Nickel, and Green Mountains Review, among others. He has received grants from the Minnesota State Arts Board, the Jerome Foundation, and is a VONA alum and a Canto Mundo fellow. Currently, he teaches creative writing at Minnesota State University in Mankato and through the Minnesota Prison Writing Workshop. Please help me welcome Michael.
Can you hear me? Loud or good? Is it good like this?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank y'all for having me. Thank you, Carleton College Honors, for letting me know about this and hooking me up with this. I wish I could do the reading like you did, where I like have my work, but then I like don't look at it while I finish doing it. That was so badass. I want you to be like, and then just like do it. But it was dope. It was dope. So as was mentioned in my bio, I teach through the Minnesota Prison Writing Workshop. And so this drive up to Northfield was kind of familiar because I teach at Faribault Prison. And so the first poem I'm going to read is about that. I wrote it my first term teaching, so last fall. While my students were writing, I decided to do a free write along with them. So this came out of that. From my classroom window at the prison before students arrive. Because the blinds stay open, I see birds. I watch men watch those birds, how they monitor flight paths and hunger for crumbs the men shouldn't have pocketed from chow. The indifferent birds ask for nothing, desire nothing, except perhaps the sky, which is nothing to them but magnetic blue wind, their one great war of journey. I've been thinking about mine lately, my own great war. Once I met a man at a park hours before a storm, and he told me how difficult flight is for birds. He stared at the humming sky and disappeared. Later that night, I could not fall asleep, not with a fact like that. Instead, I sat at my coffee table and fed my dying rubber fig tree filtered water and eggshells I broke apart, calling them my little countries. I thought of being president. Then I said to myself, why can't I be king? When I arrived at the idea of God, I began to float. When I awoke, I understood my only burden is this simple life as a man who gets to go home and think and care for plants that do not know he is their father. If I am no one to these leaves, to whom do I belong? Thus, my great war is with myself, a wingspan of stirring thoughts that ask what's next, that wait for my response like the men beyond this window, breadcrumbs, tiny questions for birds. Each man tossing a piece at the air anticipates a swooping answer, tries not to think of what goes uneaten, of what falls towards death, wet and certain. That patch of grass they walk, its cold blades. It's late October, every step stiff and speechless. Oh, awkward, you watch me drink water. This next one is from a series of poems in the manuscript I'm working on right now. So this one is called The Pachuco's Grandson Considers Skipping School. I didn't want to be bad, but I wanted to be bad. Yesterday, someone threw a book at the sub's head. All I saw was a bird with paged wings. And today, when I walked into class baggy-jeaned, he took roll but didn't call my name. That's how I knew I didn't have to answer no more. I became absence in my seat, asleep, became block letters for the name my homie bestowed. I dreamt chain links and angel wings, how to get away. At some point we were awake, yes, all the brown boys like me, and we carved our new names into the desks in the shape of hearts. What a beautiful beating. We cut the tongues from our old shoes to stuff into new ones later, so they pop like a bullfrog puffs when it's in danger. No one to recognize us. We were more mustached than our mothers could manage. Before fifth period, some left. Through a window, my homies clicked chins, what's up, for me to come through. Don't let the wind between the branches fool you, their eyes said. Every looking out also implies enclosure. Out there, where I could be anything, I placed a silver chain around my neck, and it fit like a slipped halo. So I always try to carry with me a little notepad in case things come up when I'm just like living life. And so this poem happened to me when I was doing that, and it was my first time back. I'm from California, so it was my first time back in California after being living in Mankato doing the MFA after my first semester. And I went to the park but right next to where I went to elementary school, and then I got this poem. It took me a few years to write though, but it happens like that, and it's okay. My hometown has a man riding a bicycle with no chain. His legs a too quick clock, too easy in showing how time away from home any amount is too long. Pomona becomes a man asking if I want to buy his MP3 player. He raises headphones to my face. Listen, no one believes me, but he doesn't say about what. It's how they say yes but don't look. I nod. He talks about his daughter who works at AutoZone, who's the manager now, the jefe. But his son, who I'm certain I went to school with, who walked into 5th grade one morning with shaved eyebrows and sat down without saying a word, who never spoke to anyone ever again, he does not mention. Not even once. Where have all my classmates gone? Where I grew up has nowhere to live, but he says he'll be all right, he'll be all right, he'll be all right, because the lady from the next block over owes him for raking her yard. But have I seen the Bible around? No one's going to pick it up, he says, not unless it had $100 in it. Wouldn't that be something? He's nodding, he's balancing himself on the bike, he's trying to leave, but will I be here tomorrow? He might be around, my town's always around, so how about that MP3? I can keep it if I want. No, how about for 10 bucks? My town is presenting its calloused palm. Now, my town relentless, pedaling like everything is all right, like everything is all right, like a Ferris wheel no one's going to ride. Look at it spin through the evening, each basket scooping sunlight and shadow. The carnival worker we turn away from calls for us and keeps calling, long after he knows we're gone. I drink water and then you give me applause. No. As was mentioned, I did do graffiti for a few years between the ages of like 15 and 18, right before it became a felony. And so the manuscript has a lot of that in there, and this is an example of that. It's called Elegy with Puppet Strings. In high school, there was a boy who went by Dyer. And because he was the best graffiti artist I knew, and out of respect, I never called any other name. This memory comes with the end of an afternoon and an '87 Corolla idling by the curb waiting for us to go. There's no other way you can have it. I learned long ago that a name can be written on anything and stay. Dyer, for example, holding an empty spray can, traces his name on the sky. I still see it. And when it stays with me long enough, there I am, again at my desk in 10th grade geometry, hunched over ripped graph paper. The voice of Mrs. Graham rises behind me. She yells about the circles I can't draw with a compass. Watch mine curl out in spirals. Every small loss blossoms, and there's no way to contain any of them. Not the Corolla I had until the axle snapped, not Dyer's wrist as he practiced his name, even in class. Dyer, whose indifference for police sirens that bounced around those nights we spent painting, somehow calmed me too. That was the year I was no one and realized it. So I followed him into train yards rattling. I used to believe that what we left came back like a circle in memory. It returns, altered. Dyer and the silvers we stole from the 99-cent store, how we coughed over the clack of marbles and cans fit against our belts and bellies all the way out to the parking lot where our homies waited in the Corolla in case we had to run. A person can't stop themselves from thinking about who they were or where an abandoned building with its boarded up windows that mattered to no one except us stood. And Dyer there silvering his unfinished name with a focus I likened to genius, the spiraling of his E, a small open window into another dimension where I could see, even then, his name at the front of an art gallery. And what did we know of the years to come, of what we had to do with them? That year I pretended not to care about school until I didn't, swapping textbooks for paint in a JanSport. A whole year can go like this. Then a bell rings, you get up and are gone. It happened this way and I couldn't contain it. When I left, I forgot to leave. What I mean is one of me stayed there with Dyer, who would continue looking as young as he could no longer possibly be. Those baggy khakis, that oversized black hoodie, as if asking what really happened to me. There are no small losses. Dyer, I can see your wrists moving in slow circles across the air, just as someone honks a horn. Dyer, I say again, the homies are waiting. You look down to where the birds have left, the branches nodding, and you say to me, why not let them? This is a one poem warning, so I have one more poem left. I've been trying to be good, Anders, and read only poems that I've read before so I can keep practicing. But I'm going to mess up right now and read something that's brand new. It's new shit. And I feel it's fitting with the idea of community because when I moved from Pomona, California, a very brown place, I came to Mankato, Minnesota, a very not brown place. And this poem started in a one-day workshop with Marcus Wicker when he visited Mankato for a reading series. So I have him to thank for this, and let's see how it goes. After the man who found me doing burpees at the park said, I can tell you learned those on the inside. This isn't the story I wanted to tell, but at some point every person must assess the damage. It seems simple, except for days I'm a desert. What I mean is I have nothing to say to myself, and I shouldn't be surprised. I like to think I've outgrown whatever I was, especially since now I am so academic and unthuggish. Concrete and graffiti gleam long ago traded in for this messenger bag, the coconut oil I cook with. This morning I took stock of my organs. Yes, I imagined them at attention, like little soldiers. Tell me, who would go to war for you? Had my colleagues seen me, and had my homies been there, at the park, it would have been all, you gonna let that fool punk you, Remick? Michael, it's not worth thinking about. Still terrible, but he can fuck one of us up, but not 10 of us. The rules of engagement are few where I come from, like when, as boys, we stood ready inside a cement square, our scorching playground. The dodgeball we fired at the handball wall. Simple it seemed if you didn't catch it, a gauntlet of tight fists swung at you. Our bodies sang for cinder block safety. Knuckles knocking on a rib cage gate could be a type of anthem, a thing to believe in. What do you call faith? The young and innocent we were not. We were too many legs bent. We were Spartan boys training. Oh, the maze bodies make from melee. That I could become desert-like and sporty, but not honeybee or duck pond for lovers floating blankets. What are you bound to? Yes, you. I tangle all the time. For me, it's always been about how much a brown boy can brave. But even tempered glass is made to shatter, just quietly. Don't confuse those fragments for yearning. Don't get me wrong, I've always wanted a Whitman-esque life, but this can't be the only way. I came here to write you a story, where 4 brown boys set out to solve a murder in their hood. But my characters keep getting stopped by cops and told to stay still. They keep asking if my boys have anything sharp that might pierce while police search. My boys learn to lace their fingers instead of gather evidence you can spend your whole life unraveling. At some point, all my homies were down for whatever, and I don't know why. How did we decide which bodies are worth defending? All we need is one clue, a break in the case. I can't finish this story, the story I wanted you to have. I spent all day running my fingers like a searchlight over my body. Finally, I stopped to read the wrinkles that rest over my knuckles. My hands lay flat. I wanted to be okay to see my skin as landing pad for little birds' feet, that those wrinkles are just mapped wind. I think it could be a boy's grid for charting a night sky. Yes, let us give him the time he needs to name each star. Thank you.
The next reader is Matt Rasmussen. Matt Rasmussen is the author of Black Aperture, which won the 2013 Walt Whitman Award, the 2014 Minnesota Book Award for Poetry, and was a finalist for the National Book Award. His poems have been published in the Literary Review, Gulf Coast, Waterstone Review, Revolver, Paper Darts, Poets.org, and elsewhere. He received a 2014 Pushcart Prize and was awarded the 2015 Holmes National Poetry Prize from Princeton University. A founding editor for the independent poetry press Birds LLC, he lives in Robbinsdale, Minnesota. Please help me welcome Matt.
Hello. Hello. Wow, you do have to get close to it. All right. This is always awkward for me because then I don't know where to do this thing. Do it over here. I'll do it over here for now. I just have one book and it's old, so I feel weird reading from it, but it concerns my brother's suicide. So I'll read a few poems from there, and then I'll read the poem from the zine, and then maybe close with another elegy. After suicide. A hole is nothing but what remains around it. My brother stood in the refrigerator light, drinking milk that poured out of his head, through thick black curls, down his back, into a puddle growing larger around him. My body stood between the living room and kitchen, 1 foot on worn carpet, 1 on cold linoleum. He couldn't hear his name clouding from my mouth, settling in the fluorescent air. I wanted to put my finger into the hole, feel the smooth channel he escaped through, stop the milk so he could swallow it. But my body held as if driven into place. The milk on the floor reflected the light, then became it, floated upward and outward, filling every shadow, blowing the dark open. This poem features some outdated technology called the answering machine. And you had to record an outgoing message on the answering machine. It's called voicemail now or whatever. But now the thing does the message for you, right? It's like, you've reached, and then you just say your name, Matt. He's not here, whatever. That's what mine does. Anyway, hopefully you remember what they look like. Outgoing. Our answering machine still played your message, and on the date you died, Dad asked me to replace it. I was chosen to save us the shame of dead you answering calls. Hello, I've just shot myself. To leave a message for me, call hell. The clear cassette lay inside the white machine, like a tiny patient being monitored, or a miniature glass briefcase protecting the scroll of lost voices. Everything barely mattered, and then no longer did. I pressed record and laid my voice over yours, muting it forever, and even now. I'm sorry we're not here, I began. I'm like shaking because I'm nervous. It's just for effect. Totally calm. I'm a great actor. All right, a couple more suicide poems, sorry. After suicide. At the party celebrating me, you always show up late and dead. Ding dong, ding dong. No one gets the door. We know better. You let yourself in, sidle up to people who never knew you and tell them jokes. I have such terrible aim, I had to shoot myself twice. 3 suicidal Norwegians walk into a bar. The first one complains of a splitting headache and orders a beer, a gun, and 2 bullets. I've heard it. We all have. Unable to ignite even a sizzle of laughter, you put a flashlight into your mouth and turn it on. On the wall behind you, a coin of light hovers like the miniature sun a magnifying glass makes. Your head's a projector showing the movie of your death. We sip our drinks with unease, as luckily the wall begins to smoke, and everyone runs out onto the cool lawn to watch the house burn, relieved you're still inside. I gotta set that down. I looked at Michael while I was doing that. Normally I have some sort of beverage up here that I claim I'm sponsored by. Today it's just water. Or Tito's. Either one. I'm just kidding. Okay. Reverse suicide. The guy Dad sold your car to comes back to get his money, leaves the car. With filthy rags, we rub it down until it doesn't shine, and wipe your blood into the seams of the seat. Each snowflake stirs before lifting into the sky, as I learn you won't be dead. The unsuffering ends when the mess of your head pulls together around a bullet in your mouth. You spit it into Dad's gun before arriving in the driveway, while the evening brightens, and we pour bag after bag of leaves on the lawn, waiting for them to leap onto the bare branches. All right, I'm going to read my poem from the beautiful zine. I should say thank you to Emily and Amal and Amira for this beautiful thing, this reading, and the other poets for putting up with me. This is called Victory Memorial Drive, and it's about this, I don't know if you've been to the city of Minneapolis. There's a thing called Victory Memorial Drive, which is it's in honor of all the citizens of Hennepin County who died during World War I, which at the time was called the Great War. And essentially, I'll give you a little background. This, I don't know, but I was going to start reading, and then I did this. Now I can't stop. They planted trees for all the members, the people who died, and then a lot of the trees died from a disease. So I'm blanking on what it is. God, I'm so nervous, you guys. All right, it's called Victory Memorial Drive. If we're not moving away from tragedy, we're moving toward it. None of the dead know they grew these green lungs. A lost life never discovers who won. What do you plant to honor the death of a tree planted to honor the dead? Trees have seen nearly every war, but I doubt they would deem any of them great. They wait patiently in line, but for what? Dear trees, because they are never not listening, I say, you can live all you want, but only get to die once. I can never discern when the future arrives, and I'm always just a little delayed. Not late, just never completely alive. Do we believe trees have no feelings, or are they just sleeping? There's a woman around here who walks everywhere backwards. And when I see her, it's difficult not to feel like I've been mistaken my entire life. That's true. While I was writing that poem on a park bench at that drive, this woman walked by me going backwards. And I've seen her several times since then. And I actually recorded that poem for Revolver, and it was sort of an on-site thing you could listen to on your phone. And the idea was that somebody would be listening to it, and that she would walk by. Pretty sure that never happened. All right, my last poem is an elegy, which is a poem of loss or mourning. That's my teaching moment. This is an elegy for something near and dear to my heart, which is gone forever, the Metrodome. So it's elegy for Metrodome, and it begins with an epigraph by David Berman from his poem about hallways. It's called An Outdoors That Is Somehow Indoors. You always held your breath while we were failing, and also those rare moments we weren't. Dear fiberglass cavern that held us like a giant yet soft mouth, I first became a cell in your bowl of bodies. Your blue seats bloomed in tears, each one waiting to unfold an embrace for our bodies. As a boy, I would lay in bed and behold your pressurized darkness. How could something be so empty and so about to burst? I became a seated thought in the stadium of my skull. If you think about it, there was no outdoors before there was an indoors. Within your symmetry, we only felt more imperfect, and if I am inside something, then there must be something within me. Everyone rushes to protect the outdoors, but who will weep for the lost indoors of America? Where are our indoorsmen, willing to chain themselves to an escalator? Because air held you up, your collapse could never stop arriving. Would our breath have kept your roof aloft? From afar, you look like someone strapped down a cloud or built a giant pillow for the sky. But why? Are there doors we don't know are inside? You will never swallow us again, never let us touch our knee to your never thirsty lawn, and no one now will ever raise a finger toward your Teflon sky. Oh, giant lung, exhale me home. Thanks.
Our next and second to last reader is Jiyoung Shin, who was born in Seoul, Korea. Hold on. Can you hear me? She was born in Seoul, Korea during Park Chung-hee's military dictatorship and grew up in the Chicago area. She is the editor of the best-selling anthology A Good Time for Truth, Race in Minnesota, author of poetry collections Unbearable Splendor, which was the finalist for the 2017 PEN USA Literary Award for Poetry, and winner of the 2016 Minnesota Book Award for Poetry, as well as Rough and Savage and Skirt Full of Black, which was the winner of the 2007 Asian American Literary Award for Poetry. She's also the co-editor of Outsiders Within, writing on transracial adoption, and the author of bilingual illustrated book for children, Cooper's Lesson. She lives in Minneapolis. Please help me welcome Jiyoung Shin.
Thank you, Amira, and for this beautiful, beautiful work of art. And Emily, thank you so much. I normally don't bring water up, but I want to be like the cool kids. And we're like 2 minutes behind schedule, this amazing schedule that Emily put together, that's second by second. It's a little nerve-wracking, but you know, I did my last 3 years of college at McAllister. Actually, I think this is the first time I've been at Carleton, and I was just recently at St. Olaf, but I'd been there one other time before. And I think while I was at McAllister, I used to think of Carleton and St. Olaf as like the Sodom and Gomorrah of overachievement. Like, what do those kids do over there? What's there to do? So anyway, it's really fun to be here. Yes, so I became a poet. Happens to when you go to McAllister. But on a serious and sad note, I mean, I feel like I'm having deja vu because I've done so many poetry readings during a week when there's been a mass shooting or a school shooting in this country. And I've been starting to put that line about Park Chung-hee in my biography the past year or two, or really actually just since the inauguration, to kind of remind myself what we're doing as artists, as civic, cultural workers, and the role that authoritarianism, militarism has in all of our lives, and in my life. So it's also like a banner week. Okay, so February 14th this year was both St. Valentine's feast day. I didn't know that he'd been beheaded. Did you guys know that?
Yeah.
So I knew he was a martyr, and I knew he'd been imprisoned. And then, of course, that was also Lent. And February comes from Latin februarium, which means it's a month of purification. So if you're feeling corrupt, this is the month to purify. And today is the last day of the year of the rooster. So I'm wondering if we can give the rooster a fond farewell applause. Tomorrow starts the year of the dog, which, you know, it's just not that inspiring to me. I have a dog. Raise your hand if you have a dog. I don't know. We gotta make it work, folks. About that. Yeah. So another school shooting, another young white man, another semi-automatic weapon purchased legally, and more bodies, more people. So when I was thinking about civics and thinking about what I could read, and then that happened, and a lot of my poems in this book, Unbearable Splendor, are kind of about the body and isolation. It's a book that I thought of as being about the politics of hospitality, and there's several sort of patron saints of the book, but one who's not really in the book is Odysseus, and I started because I thought I was going to rewrite the Odyssey, and so I was interested in the epic and also the feminine epic. But as I was rereading the Odyssey, Fagel's translation, I realized that it's really this book about hospitality, where he is constantly being addressed as dear stranger when he comes to different shores. And all he has really is his body, and then he has to prove that he's a worthy guest. So that's part of what this book is about. And then thinking about these mass shootings, which is 4 or more people, and then thinking about the U.S. in general being the world's biggest arms dealer, and that 99.5% of us are non-Indigenous here. As far as civics, I thought I would read a poem about Antigone, who I see as someone who's concerned with corpses. The whole book is like a tragedy. Everyone's sort of a dead person walking in the beginning. And she's concerned with her brother's corpse. And there's been a civil war, and there's been a fratricide, which you could say all wars are fratricides. So I'll read a couple, maybe 1 or 2 Antigone poems. If I can find it. Sorry. Okay. So there's 2 epigraphs before this poem. The first is by Julia Kristeva from her book Strangers to Ourselves. By what right are you a foreigner? The foreigner is a symptom, said Danielle Lochak. Psychologically, he signifies the difficulty we have of living as and other, and with others. Politically, he underscores the limits of nation states and of the national political conscience that characterizes them, and that we have all deeply interiorized to the point of considering it normal that there are foreigners, that is, people who do not have the same rights as we do. And then a quote from the character Antigone from the play Antigone by Sophocles. I have been a stranger here in my own land all my life. So this poem is called The Error of Blood Relation, and it's based on a scholarly article by William Robert titled Antigone's Nature. I apologize to my colleagues who've heard this before. I feel like I should promote my book for my press. Okay. Where is this criminal? Brother cadaver, across her mortal limits in the terrain of the impossible, we can follow her strange latitudes. Why doesn't she fly? Antigone, sister, daughter, the uncradled, the unbride, bear her name, tame her, dazzling this line of sight. Were we born to love? Flight through the palace, an arrow through Ismene, oil on the body, dust on the body, birds and dogs unmasking a cadaver named brother. What is a king for? Traitor, the body, the loudness of duty. Polynices, did you think the throne would fit down your throat alone? Brave river of men behind you, a wonderland of death. Is it better to know? Woman child, relieve us of our weather full of battle, luster. A child of incest resists traditional lines of genealogy. The sky was a bright choir of gold, a carnival of brothers. We love war. Soldiers losing their names. Gods, leave us to make my name Frey, my brother, fury, form and torn. Can't you be quiet and just live? Antigone speaking and acting from the other side, beyond altars and thrones, into the crypt of heart and home, a woman who improperly speaks, who makes marriage with the systematically fatal. Take me with you. Wakes the brother from the cadaver, disappearing boat, what blood and threat heaves us across the threshold, household we walk every barrens for fidelity to the dead, feeding fine on our common loss, any cost, don't leave me here alone. Incest and the last dress, hanging in your virgin's closet, hoarding conjugal surplus and in debt to its final price. Where have we courted this sexed dialectic? I don't know if I'm a woman here at last. Subjects severing, suffering, are we ruined citizens? Any contested king of balm and sin, the error of blood relation. The mother of my own death. Antigone, a new mother, asunder some heavy ledger, to taint and tear you, make you cave and kin to my sister of unbearable splendor, until death do us unite. Daughter of cadavers, your wedding underground, a dire, foreign bargain, make yourself a stranger now with your betrothed. Father, mother, brothers, I've brought you my eyes. Now with your brother, all together, dining on the dark. Because this is so beautiful, I thought I'd read the poem in here. Did you know? How many of you have been onto the ebay.com? You can admit it, it's okay. All right. You can actually buy, there's several of them, a Russian cosmonaut spacesuit, used, with their name on it. They're amazing. They're only $40,000. So is that like a week of Carleton tuition or something? Great. I really can't criticize, because before I went to Mac, I went to Boston University, which at the time was the most expensive university in the country. But yeah, it's not that much money for a spacesuit. Okay, just saying. So there's a spacesuit in here, and because there's a tree. Matt Rasmussen. Okay, you guys, he was so self-deprecating, but he has all these party tricks. Matt Rasmussen. He can take 2 cans, and he can flip one over, because why? What did you used to do? You were a bartender?
I worked in a distributor.
You worked in a beer can distributor. Also very good at foosball. I feel like I have to give your resume a boost here or something. Like, down on yourself. Okay. guys know, we're in a mass extinction event. That's the house we live in. That's our metronome. I wandered into a mass extinction event. Before I knew what was happening, I renounced my humanity in an attempt to escape the fate of my betters and strangers. The floods gathered up the last of the patients in small cork boats that fell from the sky like leaves from a maple tree in autumn's last exhalation. What was everything I could sacrifice for a Soyuz spacesuit? Something worn in and battle-tested. And they're dirty. I mean, they're like not. Yeah, they're dirty. It's dirty in space. Just give me a sign, I said, cursing the gods and demons of my forefathers. With the helmet's face shield down, I had difficulty panning gold from the rivers of Colorado. But I said, I will prevail. The bracelets and anklets I made with the metal chinkled and chankled. Okay, who knows that reference? Get extra credit. Chinkle, chankle? Oh my God, A+. Thank you. No one ever knows that. I saw Daniel Radcliffe naked in Equus. I'm like, it's burned. Chinkle, chankle. That's a great place. Focus. Okay, and I caparisoned like a fine knight's horse, encouraged by prancing and unyielding vanity. I wrote obituary after homage, after ode, after elegy for every species larger than my thumb. The flora and fauna care nothing for the world of letters. The trees recoiled at the cannibalism of paper. I buried every book deep, so deep a place without the language of signs. Okay, read one more. We're bringing this big thing up there. I don't know, these are also grim. Cheerful, not cheerful, not cheerful. Not cheerful. Well, this is kind of fun because it has a shape. All right. So, remember when you did concrete poetry in 3rd grade or whatever? This has an epigraph type thing too. So I got interested in the lottery. Here's a lottery from the first lotterie, Loterie Royale in 1565, which was how the crown was raising money. So from the Histoire de Loterie, in the 18th century, it is the religious lotteries authorized by the royal power which arrived in force to allow several religious orders to survive. Oh, thank God. Especially to finance the construction as well as repair of many buildings they own. Thus, in Paris, St. Sulpice Church and the Church of St. Genevieve managed to emerge. But before the popularity of religious lotteries, and considering the benefits collected, the state seeks to recover the monopoly of these gains. The monarchy banned religious lotteries by compensating modestly, blah, 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 blah. The income it generates, we will buy the Champ de Mars, and we build the military school. So it's called unnatural selection. I feel like I have to drink out of this because I brought it up here.
Yeah.
Unnatural selection. And there we came upon a child lottery, one stutter of brides, water, water everywhere, religious feeling, a cape within, monk underground, chthonic low-rise, descend, count us all, my number, the registry, game of chance, a first draw, a desperate gamble, here, king, I, king here, gamble a desperate, draw first, a chance of game, register the number, my all, us count descend, low-rise, chronic, underground, monk within a cape, a feeling, religious everywhere water, water brides, stutter, one lottery, child upon, came we, there, and. Thank you very much.
So I'm going to welcome our last poet before the Q&A section afterwards. So Heidi Erdrich is Ojibwe enrolled at Turtle Mountain. She's the author and editor of 8 books, most recently the poetry collection, curator of ephemera at the New Museum for Archaic Media. Hyde co-edited the anthology of Native American women's writings, Sister Nations, and is editor of New Poets of Native Nations, forthcoming from Grey Wolf Press in 2018. Her nonfiction memoir and recipes, Original Local Indigenous Food Stories, was 2014 City Page's top food book. Hyde's awards include First Peoples Fund, Minnesota State Arts Board, and the Loft McKnight Fellowship in Prose. She works as a literary artist, mentor, teacher, scholar, visual arts curator, and editor. Hyde has collaborated with artists on award-winning poem videos and animations created with all Indigenous crew. Her most recent book incorporates her poem videos via QR codes. Hyde teaches in Augsburg College Low Residency MFA program. Please help me welcome Hyde.
Thank you very much. I'm probably going to eat this microphone. Oh my gosh, it's so hard to go last. Everybody was so good and showy. And even though it's hard to go after Gretchen and Anderson and everybody else, it's very hard to go after Sun Young because she's like the Mrs. Maisel of poetry. She's just so witty and like random at times, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna be like, let me get down to business and read these poems to you. So I have to put on these glasses, and then I can't make eye contact with you. I'm sorry about that. But you want me to be able to read. And I didn't bring anything to drink, so I don't have a prop. But I do have this incredibly beautiful thing, so thank you, Amira, for this. It's just, let's give her a little applause for this. And somehow, when I opened this, I was like, is that a picture of me and my sisters in the late 80s in our naturalized jeans? And our tropical shirts, our hot tropical shirts. I swear it really looked like us. So that was pretty funny. And I wanted to thank everybody who put this together. I mean, we could just come here and yell at you with no microphones from the bottom of from this area, or walk up and down the aisles, but it is really nice to have electricity and microphones and tables and books. And they fed us, so thank you so much, everybody, but especially the Distinguished Women's Visitors Fund. And I promised that I would say a little something about community. I have a quote here about my writing arises in Ojibwe and larger Native American community and sisterhood with women. But community is not always a positive thing or a pleasant thing, or it doesn't always have the warm fuzzies. And not too long ago, during this horrendous year, and the great reveal, as one of my sisters calls it, there was a weekend where the 50 or so professional Native poets decided to cannibalize one another and go after each other on the internet. And it was vicious and terrible. And I kept thinking, this is what we have to not let them make us do. We should not break down and bite each other like mad dogs. We need to do something else. And I asked myself the question for all of us, how? How I love you, how we hang on words, how eaten with need, how we need to eat, how weevils sift the wheat, how cold it is, how thick with hoarfrost, ice slick, sleet freeze, how wintry the mix, how full of angst, how gut sick, how blue-lipped, how we drink a health, how we care, how easy over as eggs, how it all slides, how absurd, how yet tender we are, how wrapped in a thick coat, how battered, how slender the flesh, how we wrap ourselves, how many selves we all, how I miss you, many, how I see you, how your eyes warm mine, how tiny am I inside, how enormous my need, how you open an old-fashioned satchel, how deep it yawns, how bleak this need, how like winter, how it catches the light, how brilliant the sundog's perihelion, moondog's perisalien phenomenon optic, how fetching your spectacles, how my thumbs might fit alongside the slope of your nose, how my own glasses slide down the thin bridge, how ridiculous the theory of the bridge, how inane the bibble babble, how we grew to be friends, how we grew thumbs, how opposable we all are, how we grew sparks, how we blew up a fire, how angry, how incensed, how we resist, how we beat up drops, how water will not run, how we distract, how loud the dog snores, how loudly, how noisy the snow grows, how many degrees below, how we fret, how again, how we all came here, how did we come, how loves, how did we come to this? So today I started working on poems past the how poem. I'm going to say that I don't think I can read that poem, Public Grief, that's is in the book today. I could have read it 2 days ago, but it's a poem I wrote about how grief enlarges and seems meaningless at the same time, with everybody connected on social media. And it's a poem I wrote, of course, after Sandy Hook. So I don't think I can read it. If the former CIA director can't get through a public statement without crying, I'm not going to do that. Although maybe at the very end. So how did we get here? I started to think the answer became many, many things, and here's a few of them. Map back. Once they honeyed love upon us, broke the hive and plundered. Once they hugged like bears and were bears, literal bears, with shitty tails and reeking, lumbering, gutting garbage cans. Then slumber came, which figuratively means the weaker one fell for love, dumb move, and done before. Weaker ones, and many, fell off Earth, out of orbit, lost as Bowie. Midnight, blue whales, the only map back, past the mess a spirit beast can make. And here I need to note that the above is not a tale Ojibwe people tell, unless we count me. Yet it is true, humans become bears, mostly harmless, though bears come in every sort and care only for their own hungers, which means we get in the way. Collateral damage of beastly rampage, which now makes me think we do not speak of bears, but something human and more beastly, political and public, although we started with love, foolish love, and any beast reading us would know that is our one weakness. So he read us. I don't think there's anything but grimness left, so here we go. Keep trying to go for love. So this is, maybe I'll save this one for the end, because it's, no, I'll read it now. I didn't bring my beverage, foolish me. So I'll start being like, the only thing you need to know about this is that people get Ojibwe names at different times in their lives, and Ojibwe has no gender in the language. How it escaped our attention. When a whole being births into your hands, still you see your hands, no matter how unworldly the beauty of the child. Then the universe of words works past cosmology to a useful name, a handle, in English, unlike the indigenous genderless language of verbs. Moon blues, comet misses, moon looms, supermoon bleeds. Many cosmological shifts later, our hands eclipsed by the lovely being come so far, come closer than ever, across the several heavens we Ojibwe name, the layer of our atmosphere, and further out there, the fourth sky, forever sky. When you first came to us, we did not have an Ojibwe name to know the sky beyond the sky beyond the sky. How were we to know she was, he was, they are, you? How are we to know who? That's also the poem that your mom writes when you've been at college for your first 6 months. When you're something like, who was that used to live with me? How was I supposed to know who that was? And yet another brand new poem about the North. I really do love the cold, so I'm sorry about that. I'm not going to take you to the tropical adventures. North of love. A blank lake covered in snow. Whatever we do there will be writ, printed white on white, shadowed blue, then blown to hints of what went on in the terrible wonder of cold, in this our north of love. Oh, we know you want us to shut up about that, but we will go on saying love is, or love does, or love will. If we can, we tell it in Ojibwe, where love does love with you and who you love, reflexive love. Oh, we know you are watching us. You read us. In the North, we've so long been prey. We feel eyes sly and green gold always. Any feeble movement or distraction, and you do nothing but distract. Still, even this year, ice monoliths erupt and we risk our lips to melt next to art, cold art, already going back to lake as water, water taking water up and out and then back in some reflexive state the North can't teach us. We know you see us. We know you see us. We see you. We know you fear us. We fear you. We know you beat us. We will beat you. Oh, we hear you laughing. Your cruelty laps. It is not that love alone will do this for us. We know. No engine of abstraction matters unless it drives us north of love. And I don't know yet what north of love is, so if anybody wants to tell me afterwards, let me know. Just 2 more. Am I got time for 2 more? I'll just read 1 more then. This one's kind of for Sun Young because it's got a tarot card in it. I feel like a fool. Do you? A tarot card fool. A tarot deck fool looking back to see if you are looking back at me. I'll trip right off that cliff. Once in North Dakota, in my actual childhood, I saw a hobo, what we call them, when with an actual red bandana bundle he had slung on a stick. He tried to get me to walk with him. He said he had a great gift. My bigger sister snickered at that, or there'd be a red dress hanging on a tree for me too. Which brings me back to that fool tumbling ass over tea kettle into some gully, having fallen for it, then dusting fool self's ass off. Pick yourself up, start all over again. This is a world of men, this tarot deck, and yeah, the world. And yet I won't give a single pronoun to it. We were both fools. We are all fools. Once in my actual adult life, in a hideous time of lies, our own stories were required of us. Fool though I feel, real and truly fuck though we be, I picked my first person. I set my truth free. Fool, me, fool me. Thank you.
So we have time for a brief Q&A. Do the writers want to come and sit up here for this final leg of the rodeo? Here, I think this one. Here, and I can be the runner around. Does anyone have a question? Does anyone have a question? These beautiful writers. Oh, they're up there. Thanks.
What advice would any of you give to young writers and young poets specifically?
Regarding what specifically? Like what piece of it? Just in general? I would say, and you probably already heard it a million times. I don't know if they're working.
Are those working?
These are working.
That one's working. Pass that one down.
Oh, okay.
So oh gosh, that one's loud. So you've heard this probably a million times already, but my best piece of advice still is to read. Read everything that you can so that you know what you're in conversation with. And then also, I carry a notebook with me everywhere I go. A lot of people do. But it's like an external hard drive for my brain. And so when you're really busy and you have maybe a job that takes you or takes your heart and mind away from what you're doing, if that happens, you can always write it down. And then you also have like these notebooks that pile up on the shelf that you can always go back to and see who you were. And so, yeah, read everything you can and keep a writer's notebook.
I was gonna say grow up Catholic, but it might be too late for something. But that's a good one. It really helps, honestly, if you survived it. That's what I got for it right now. I do have some other advice, but.